All right, so not very much left to do on the Voronoi, guys. I mentioned we're going to cut it. We're going to cut the surface with these lines that we created, and then we're going to scale down the actual cell in order to give us thickness around the lines. What you'll see is that because it's a rapid prototyping effort, which means there are minor inaccuracies that we'll have to account for later on. And you'll see what I mean by that in just a second. So the first thing that I want to do is called a surface split. But notice if you type in split, there are a whole bunch of different types of split. So I first thought as I was kind of preparing this one, am I going to split B-rep or something like that? But it's saying split a curve with a B-rep. But that's not what I want to do because I want to cut, using the curves, I want to cut the B-rep. So I kind of read through all of these until I found surface split, which is what I really wanted to do. And generally speaking, I'm just going to throw this out there as a tip for you guys as you're exploring this stuff on your own. Generally speaking, if you find a command that does a binary function, and by binary means it uses, one type to do another function over another type, you pretty much can find the opposite of that in Grasshopper. There's almost the opposite of every single binary relationship that you can find in Grasshopper. Okay, so split with brep is the opposite of surface split, which is going to split a surface with a bunch of curves. So we're going to use surface split, which is found under intersect physical. Oh, our int is under intersect shape. Control, Alt, and click. And it'll tell you where it lives. So surface split is going to ask for the base surface, and it'll ask for the splitting curves, right? So that's pretty important, I think. The base surface is obviously going to be the main surface, right? Our base surface. And then our curves are going to be the collection of Voronoi curves that you see here. So I can plug that in right here. So now you see it's creating another surface, but you kind of have, right now it just looks like it just created the one surface. But if you hover over the F output, now you've got the really cool part. You have 44 individually trimmed surfaces.
You do though, right? Just you because you're shaped.
I have 44. You might not have 44. Okay, let's continue on. So what we're going to do, the simplest solution to this is we're going to scale them down. And then I'm going to talk through what the pros and cons are of doing that. So if I scale them down, we are going to go under Transform and Affine. And we're going to do this one right here. So it says Scale an object uniformly in all directions. Why are we doing this? So that we can create a frame around all the lines instead of just surfaces that are cut. We're almost there. You'll see it very, very soon. Thanks. So scale is going to request the base geometry, right? What are we going to scale? And that would be the individual cells like this. Actually, that should have... No, it wouldn't. And then it's going to ask for the center of scaling. And so that's why I said no, it wouldn't, because it needs the center of scaling in order to tell it where is it going to scale. If you zoom out, you'll notice that it actually put a little tiny one right here. And that is because... that's because it's scaling based on the origin point. So if I want to scale them based on their own center point, I very obviously just have to go to Surface, Analysis, Area, and plug the centroid output in. So now with that, we can create a slider for the scale factor. I usually do my sliders 0 to 0.55 to 1. And now I'm going to zoom in so you can really see what's going on. I'm also going to turn off this other stuff. Right, so these are my cells right now. And now I can scale it up or down to fill or subtract however much space I actually want to retain.
How much you give it?
What's that?
0, how much was that one?
I did
One
0
dimension?
for the slider. 0 to 0.55 to 1. Because if I just did 0 to 1, then I would get an integer. Okay. Now let's quickly talk before I move into actually just doing the subtract and the bake. Let's talk about what the pros and cons are of doing this, right? So we did a scale. Scale means that the width of its offset from the curve is going to change. So here you see I've got the original curve definitions. So if I have a very, very small surface and I scale it down by half, that means that the distance, the displacement of the edge of that surface, because it's very small, is going to be less than the displacement of the edge of a surface that's very large. So let's take a look at a small one versus a large one, right? So this is an example right here of a small surface next to a large surface like this one. Okay, so the small surface, you can see it's a percentage, right? We're scaling it by 90%, so it's 10% smaller. This one is a much bigger surface, so the distance that you see from the edge to the new edge, the original edge to the new edge, is going to be different for the smaller one to the larger one. Do you all understand why? You don't understand why. Okay, so
It's not offset, it's kind of like.
all right, so I've got this 18-inch ruler, right? Let's just go with 10 inches for now, right? So if I have a 10-inch ruler and I want to reduce it by 10%, what's the new length of my ruler going to be? 9 inches long, right? So the displacement was how much?
1.
1 inch, right? But if I have a 5-inch ruler and I want to reduce it by 10%, what's the new distance of the ruler?
No, 10% is 4, 5.
Right, 4.5. So my displacement is how much? 0.5, a half of an inch. So from a surface or a length that's half the size of the other, the displacement is also half as much as the other. Okay, so that's why it looks different from one surface to the next. I'm getting better at this explanation thing, aren't I? What you're seeing here is a little bit of a problem for us. What you need to think about when you're developing this kind of stuff is how accurate do you need to be? So, and also, how much do you have to fix? So my thought here at this point, as I was running through this, I thought, is it worth my time to go back and map an offset curve for every single curve and then recreate a new frame based off of a specific distance from every edge? It may or may not be. You know, that's up to you to decide. For us, I thought this exercise, it's mostly exploratory. We are trying to create a quick, rapid prototyping cellular frame that emulates the biological condition, right? So emulates actual cell variations. So this serves my purpose as it stands. Now, there are going to be things that I need to fix. So if you notice here, the distance to this edge is very, very small, right? That distance right there is super tiny. In fact, if I say dist, oh wait, this is in feet. Well, yeah, let's just do dist. And I go from there to here. So that's 0.13 feet, which, oops. That's 1.5 inches. And if I scale that down to something that's going to fit on like an, 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 17 sheet of paper, let's do the overall distance. So 62 feet. So if 62 feet is going to fit on, say, 17 inches, that's going to be, call it a quarter, right? So we're scaling it down to 1/4 of its original size. So that 1.5 inches, it's 1/4 inch equals a foot. So we have to divide that by 12 and then divide that by 4. And really, when that thing prints, it's going to be 0.0325 inches wide, which basically means it's non-existent. Okay, so we'll have to account for what that's going to be a little bit. Okay, so I don't expect you necessarily to do the calculations ahead of time. Let's be kind of, just quick about it. And so I'm going to ask you to, after we're done with this, we're going to actually create the flattened cut line work. We're going to print it out and see where all of those issues are, and then manually change those so that it would fit appropriately. Okay, so basically at this point, right, I'm going to start here, but I need to finish the script, right? Because right now, if I hide the surface, and if I turn everything off that I don't want, being this, I right now just have cells that are smaller. But I want the opposite of what I currently show. So I need to subtract the cells from the original surface. So I can go up to intersect, shape, and go to solid difference. Now solid difference, we've used this a few times, right? It basically takes the geometry that you're going to cut. Let me see, first beer upset, second beer upset. I think it takes the geometry you're going to cut out, and then the geometry you are going to cut from. And if this didn't work, and it didn't, then I have to switch it. So disconnect that, disconnect this, and I'll just kind of go backwards now. I've got to figure out how to predict that. It'll take a minute, actually. So this happened on my computer too, and my computer's faster than this. But it takes a minute to process this one. So if it looks like you're crashing, don't fret. It's not crashing. Just give it a minute. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video while this processes. All right, so that was a very, very short pause, but you won't know on the video anyway. So yeah, so this is it. This is the final product. There are some issues, right? So we've got some cases where, you can see the edge is very, very small, okay? But we'll have to make decisions on where and how to correct that. And you actually see, this is kind of an anomaly of Voronoi, that whatever the origin point is, or whatever point 1 or the end point, I forget, it actually for some reason deletes that. So if it's absolutely essential, you can redraw the cut in later. But right now I don't know that we're going to do that. So you should have one panel that's going to be all silly like that. If you want, you can play around before you bake. You can actually play around with the count and kind of try and bring it down. Oh, it's going to be really slow. Sorry, guys. I'll pause again. All right, so I reduced this one down to 39, and now I don't have one of those big anomaly surfaces, right? But I still have some edge concerns. All right, yes, you had a question.
Do you have to split the surface with the Voronoi, or can you just do the solid difference with the curves already? Or do they have to be two solids
I think solid difference has to be a solid.
Okay.
So I think it has to be made of
It'll be
surface.
Like the curves is one surface or solid, and then the surface itself.
Yeah, I
Okay.
believe so. I believe so.
Can you
Yes.
see it in, zoom out or?
Yes, I'll zoom out, but I'm going to stop the video first.